Everybody, thanks for watching. Real quick, stock market final is now available. Make sure you guys grab that. Also, make sure you guys take advantage of Never Pay Again membership. It is now available. Real quick about live streams. We're going to be live streaming on Merkabah Academy once the site is finished. It's up now. You guys can go on there and check out stuff. It's going to be a little different because we're adding and changing things. So it's going to be like a whole live streaming classroom that's going to be available on Merkabah Academy. We're going to do live streams from hopefully you guys, if you have capture devices, you can use your phone. You'll be able to take a live stream course with me, and everybody will be live, and we can do Q&A through video. So it's going to be almost like a Skype type of thing, but with multiple people. So it's going to be pretty cool. That's coming to Merkabah Academy. So stay tuned for that. Also, make sure you guys are checking your emails. And yeah, thanks to everybody who participated in the last live stream. I did 2 live streams so far. They are up on YouTube. But we're going to be going definitely from my site from here on out. I'll probably do a couple more on YouTube before that, but it's going to be a lot better the way it's going to be set up on Merkabah Academy to do lives and to do live lectures and live classrooms that we're going to be doing. So that's going to be cool. So make sure you guys take advantage of the sale. Make sure you guys are checking your emails. So we're going to get into this video. So real quick, talked about on the live streams, a couple people who had questions on this. And everybody knows I get into a lot of the Hebrew Israelite stuff because I believe it is the biggest threat to consciousness besides the Bible, because a lot of people are running from the Bible and Islam, going to the Hebrew Israelite, which is basically running back to the Bible, and listening to that doctrine, because it makes a lot of sense to people who don't really go deeper into research or who can't read ancient Greek and Hebrew, what have you, to see where the deception is and where the mistakes are from these Hebrews. And I don't want to, come off too controversial or what have you. Well, a lot controversial, but not disrespectful. I appreciate when people come and ask legitimate questions and are, respectful in asking their questions. So shout out to the Hebrews or the people who are believing in the Hebrew faith for asking such good questions and making valid points. But still, I got to question this bullshit because, you guys, you got to wake up. So we're going to get into, in this video, of course, the Al-Yahudu tablets. And real quick about these tablets. They found about 200 of these tablets written in Akkadian cuneiform. And it's definitely something to look at and, and be like, wow, these tablets are cool. And it's definitely a language that you wouldn't, understand. And it makes you scratch your head as to why this is even written in the first place. See, what happens is, but I'll get too deep into all this because I hate dragging shit on, but I'll be trying to make my point. But these guys are just hype about what was found and what was said to be found. So these tablets supposed to be proof that the Hebrews were in exile in Babylon and that they existed prior to the 4th century BCE, which, as I told you guys, no fucking way. So this is supposed to be their proof, these tablets and what have you. They're supposed to be speaking to the Babylonian exile of the Jews in Babylon, or what have you, which the Babylonians inherited the land from the Assyrians, or what have you. So in these tablets, what they're basically talking about is how life was for the Jews in exile. And these tablets are basically going through land deals and purchase agreements and what have you, cushy stuff that you would expect to be for a people that's living during that time, not a people that's supposed to be in exile in a foreign land. Now, the whole thing with that is the Bible is, it has contradictions on this whole thing, because some people will tell you that the Babylonian exile of the Jews was basically them being exiled, right? But you heard of the Babylonian captivity, right? And it says in the Bible, in Isaiah 42, I believe, that it was a punishment. But from the inscriptions or how they basically translated these tablets, that it wasn't a punishment, that they was in there buying, planting barley and just living good and living off the land and living with the Babylonians, and everything was good the way the tablets put it. But is supposed to be Babylonian captivity. They're supposed to be in exile. So it doesn't fit that what the Bible says doesn't fit with what these tablets are supposed to be saying. Now, the thing is, one, it's a lot of criticism around these tablets, and this is what these people are not reading and digging deep into, is the criticism. The reason why I didn't jump on this before, because I had to go back and look through my notes, because I know I ran into this whole thing before, and I just looked at it, and when I saw the initial findings of the tablets, I blew it off, because I was like, ha, because what people don't understand is, one, just out of nowhere, they find these tablets. There's no history or background on these tablets. They just basically ended up in Israeli collector's hands and was basically shown to the people in 1999, right? So supposedly these tablets are, thousands of years old, super old tablets. And he was sitting on the tablets for years. He had the tablets. And then all of a sudden, we just start finding out about them in 1999, and then they, realized it was, over 200, I believe, of these tablets, and talking about all this stuff supposedly relating to the Israelites. And the thing is, one, you only had two researchers research these tablets, and both of these researchers, upon researching these tablets, did the same thing that Stitching did and everybody else does. They write books. So private hands don't get to touch these tablets and do a real analysis on these tablets. But these hand-picked people, researchers, get to review the tablets and then write books on them and say, oh, it had all this stuff, even though it contradicts what the Bible was saying as far as what the tablets is saying, right? So they ignore all this stuff. But there's no public records, right? No dates. We don't know the exact location. We know it's found in Iraq, but we don't know the exact location. There's no real public information on the whole situation that came about and whoever found these tablets. There's nothing. We don't know who found them. We don't know where they found them at. We don't know the circumstances surrounding the exploration of it. They wasn't found during any sanction or real archaeological dig. Understand? Just out of nowhere, hey, this collector has these tablets. Here they go. Yes, I'm talking about the Al-Yahudu tablets. So now, why is this even a thing, right? Why are we talking about this? Because you got to understand, I talk about this in many videos. You got to understand, one, there's absolutely no proof, no proven concrete proof that the Jews existed prior to, I'm going to say, between the 2nd and 4th century BCE, right? So let's just say before the Greeks came into power, there's no proof of these people. The Greeks coming into power is how we even get the first mention of these people, supposedly. Because remember, I talked about how Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, who commissioned the 72 Hebrew elders to translate the Hebrew law into Greek and give us the Septuagint, right? Supposedly this was done, and we get the information about this in the letters of Orestes, which is pseudo and proven to be a forgery. So again, all of a sudden, poof, we get the Septuagint Greek from the Ptolemies, who basically crowned themselves, pharaohs after, conquering Egypt, right? So we understand that. Just the Greeks gives us these manuscripts or what have you, supposedly translated by Jews. So we don't have any Hebrew manuscript that predates the Septuagint Greek. That's why these tablets are important, because even though it's not giving us a manuscript, it's talking about a people. And that's a problem, because the people it's talking about, we can't prove are actual Jews. What they're going by is the names. Supposedly the names mentioned in the tablets supposedly have that, spelling that denotes that they are worshipers of Yahweh, right? Forget all that, because we don't know if that's actually what's in there. It's only two people who examine these documents, and they don't give us exactly what the documents supposedly say. They give us what they think they said. There's no way for you to prove this is what they're saying, what the tablets are saying. So we got to go by that. Then there's issues with that, which I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper in a second. But understand that we don't have anything before the Septuagint Greek that's concrete proven. So these tablets is a big deal, because they would imply that, hey, we have proof of the Babylonian exile. This would be before the Septuagint. which would make it look like all this stuff is true, that it's all real, that we got proof that these people existed, right? But the tablets are bogus, period. Because if you found me proof of the Hebrews before the 4th century BCE, then you would have to look at everything a little bit more differently. But we know that's not true, because they are a creation of the Greeks, which I've proven that before. They are a creation of the Greeks. So what really these tablets are is speaking to a people that actually existed during this time. If you want to say it's talking about barley and planting and giving you an account of what somebody bought and sold, it's giving you an account that these Jews was living good in exile, supposedly in imprisonment and, in punishment. But it's giving you an account of, sales transactions and all this stuff like that. Why would these people do that? So since there is no proof that these Hebrews existed, they have to put themselves in places in time, and they're stealing the identity of people trying to pass themselves off as Jews. There's no proof. So whoever the tablets are speaking to are not the biblical Jews. They're trying to make themselves be this people, but there's not enough proof to say that they are. They try to do the same thing with the Merkabah stela. So the Merkabah stela is basically, the inscription that's supposed to say Israel down there, which is super highly debated. It doesn't say Israel the way we read Israel. It's pertaining to a people. Israel is supposed to be a nation, a land. The inscription, when you understand it, is not speaking towards a land, but a group of people. And it's interpreted differently by a bunch of different scholars. Some people think it means it's talking about a nomadic people or a group of people that were like workers, gardeners and stuff like that. Like that's what it's supposedly speaking towards, not the people of Israel or Israel as a nation. So it's a highly debated stela. I've seen it myself. I've talked to researchers at the Cairo Museum who will tell you that it's bogus, and they believe that somebody chiseled that in there because it's just a slight mark that you need to put on that inscription, that glyph, to make it look as if it's saying Israel, in that language. But it can mean a bunch of different things. It's speaking more towards a people and not a land. So the Merkabah stela is one of the ways they try to put themselves in and say, see, there's a mention of Israel. You know what I'm saying? But that's not enough still. And the people jump on this and they go crazy. That's not enough proof. The claims of the Bible are so bold. We need more than some damn bullshit ass scraping or carving. We need more than some damn tablets. When you're talking about a man parting the sea and Elijah and Elisha having all these powers and God and all this shit the Bible talking about, we need more proof. There's no bodies. There's no civilizations. We don't find no remnants of these peoples. It's always a tablet or a shard or some bullshit that they claim is old Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, or what have you, that's trying to give validity to these people existing when they didn't exist. It's just that simple. So now it says here, and these are the criticisms that they leave out, that people don't research. You got to read what the criticisms is always saying and what the debate is amongst the researchers. So it says, the tablets primarily contain administrative and legal records such as contracts, property transactions, and tax records. Critics argue that these documents offer limited insight into a broader cultural and social experiences of the Judean community in exile. They provide specific data but lack narrative context. Fragmentary evidence. Many of the tablets are fragmented or incomplete, which poses challenges for interpretation. The incomplete nature of the evidence can lead to gaps in understanding and potentially misleading conclusions. Bias in interpretation. As with any ancient source, the interpretation of the Al-Yahudu tablets is subject to the biases and perspectives of modern scholars. Different scholars may interpret the same evidence in various ways, leading to different conclusions about the nature of Judean life in Babylon. Language and translation issues. The tablets are written in Akkadian cuneiform, and translating these texts into modern languages involves complex linguistic challenges Misinterpretations or inaccuracies in translation can affect the understanding of the document. Comparative evidence critics also point out the need to comparative evidence from other contemporary sources to provide a more balanced view. And he's basically saying this because only 2 researchers reviewed this thing. The tablets alone may not offer a comprehensive picture without considering other archaeological and textual evidence from the same period. Historical and political context. The political and historical context in which the tablets were discovered and studied can influence their interpretation. For example, modern political and religious agendas can sometimes color the analysis of ancient texts. And there's a lot more of this, because the more you read, the more you dig into it, the more you're going to see the critics tear it apart. Because one, it's not proven. Something that's not proven. You had 2 researchers look at it, and then just, they can put out anything. They can publish whatever they want. You don't read Arcadian cuneiform. So you're not going to be able to go in there and say, hey, this says this and that. And there's a small amount of people who do. And anybody who does is already in pocket. The tablets are fragmented. And, if you got the majority of the researchers on your side, it basically comes down to who believes it says what. So you can come in and say, no, I don't think it says this. And then you overruled by a bunch of other researchers. But that's not the case, because you won't have the opportunity to examine the tablets yourself. Some of them are on display, but even still, they're fragmented. You can't make out everything. So it's a lot of issues with that. So again, a lot of people want to believe that these tablets are absolute proof. You believe what you want. It's no proof. It's not proven any of the things that the Bible says. These tablets don't prove anything. And you would need a lot more than these tablets to prove that these people existed. There's no proof that the biblical Jews existed. Yes, did Black Jews exist back then? Of course they did. And these are the ones that the Hasmoneans converted, and that, the whole after, the conquest of Kemet, the whole creation of this whole thing. And it was Black people there. They were the ones first indoctrinated to go out and spread this word. That's what happened. And this is why we see the Igbo and all these other ancient African groups pop up claiming to be, Jews or what have you. We know what happened in the Aksum Empire. We know what happened in Ethiopia. We know that this stuff spread with Judaism and Christianity. And most of the people over there during that time was one of one. Islam came into play, and it was converting people as well. So when you go back and do the actual research, this is what you'll find, especially with Islam. People were converting. We know the Syrians were mostly Jews. Then that became Christians. The entirety, almost the whole of the Arab world back then were Christians and Jews. And then Islam came later on because they had to give them something to rally around. You can't have people going out there chopping off heads and killing people under the religion of Christianity and Judaism. You need somebody to hide behind. So that's why Islam was created, because they were going to be using these Muslims to go out and do the dirty work. And they couldn't be hiding under that banner or, publicly showing the banner of Christianity, Judaism, while going out and slaughtering people. Now, the whole reason for the Babylonian exile, the reason why they put that in there with that timeline is because in real recorded history, there was a lot going on. You had the Persian conquering everything and going out and pillaging and raping and conquering lands that the Egyptians had. So if these Jews were in Egypt or in Egyptian territory during this time, there's a high possibility that they would have encountered the Persians, and the Persians would have wiped them out. You understand? So the Persians would have documented these people existing and coming across these people, and they would have been at war with the Persians. That never happened. There's no documentations of the Persians coming in contact with a group of people called the Jews. And this is why they put in this whole myth that Cyrus, King of Persia, gave them a pass. You understand? Why would he give them a pass to basically continue into Israel when he's conquering the place, into Jerusalem when he's conquering the place? That don't make sense. So the whole thing is they put this there to try to account for them being absent during a critical time in world history that we can prove. And there's no trace of these people. So, you know, conveniently, they're in exile in Babylon. Conveniently, they're in exile. So that's the reason for this. So they can account for that because there was a lot going on and somebody should have encountered these people. And when we go throughout history, this is what keeps happening. Nobody is accounting for these people who are traveling. You see the depictions, the pictures. They're traveling in large herds, you know, thousands of people, and nobody's seen these people and documented these people. Come on, man. There's no proof outside of the Bible that these people traveled like they traveled, you know, in the depictions and did everything they did. Nobody's speaking about these people doing these things, these biblical Jews. You only find it within the Bible. Nobody said nothing about these people outside of it. You don't start hearing about the Jews and these people existed until, you know, between the 4th century and 1st century BCE or what have you, when you have the conquest of the Greeks and Romans. And around this time, as I talked about with the Septuagint, you start hearing about these people and everything and the whole myths and what have you. And it would be pertaining to the Africans that lived in this land going out spreading this doctrine that they were indoctrinated to spread. So it's a lot to this. Because all of this goes into what the Hebrews would have believed Deuteronomy 28 is talking about as far as it being African history, because it's talking about slavery in America. When again, King James Version, written between 1604 and 1611, slavery was already going on. So when this book was being written, they already knew what was happening to the slaves, and they simply put it in the stories in a book. Deuteronomy 28 does not say the same in the oldest biblical manuscripts as it does in the King James Version. So there you go. It's not a prophecy that came true that was written 2,000 years ago, and it came true with what happened with the Africans or black people in America during slave time. That's not what happened. It's not a prophecy that came true that was written over 2,000 years ago that came true with black people being enslaved in America, and that's what the Bible is speaking to. When that King James Version you're reading from was written during slavery. Understand? It's not hard to figure out. You know, it was written during slavery. You know, it's not a prophecy. It's not, you understand what I'm saying? And even still, you got to remember that even if it was written 2,000 years ago, it just takes somebody understanding that and carrying it out. It's not a prophecy. It would be more of a prophecy if the book never existed, as far as it, you know, people being indoctrinated and reading, what have you. It would be more of a prophecy if the book was dug up. Nobody had the book. Nobody ever read the book. It was dug up and determined to be 2,000 years old. And then we read all this stuff happened from a one book that nobody read or nobody really had. Then you will look at it and be like, yo, that's more of a prophecy because what's in this book actually happened. That's not the case. Everybody had the book. People read it. So it would just be a matter of making it happen, you know, by the powers that be. They don't mention any of the biblical cities or what have you where the Bible says that these Hebrews were in exile at. It's mentioning actual places, not the biblical places. So that's another thing. Plus, you got to look at the fact that one, it's saying, they're saying that it's speaking to, Cyrus, king of Persia, giving the Jews a pass. Now understand, it's only in their interpretation of history that the Jews keep getting a pass. You understand? You go back to the letters of Orestes. Oh, it just so happens that Ptolemy freed these people and gave them a pass and ordered the Greeks to free their Jewish slaves, right? So they get a pass then. Then they get a pass because the Greeks, when they come into power, they allow them to basically continue their religion. Hellenization is going on. The Greeks are going out and fucking raping and pillaging and killing all these black folks. But the Jews supposed to be black, right? But they get to keep their religion, right? Remember, it's talking about all these idols being destroyed and the Jews conquering all these people who was worshiping all these false gods and what have you. How are these, if they did all that, how are these people still doing the same shit? How are they still around? It don't make sense. But they keep getting a pass. They get a pass by the Ptolemies. They get a pass later on by the Greeks again, letting them continue to practice their religion, and before all that, they get a pass from Cyrus, king of Persia. Because remember, the Persians came in first to conquer the Egyptian land, and this is where the Jews were supposed to have been. And when they're coming out of exile, this is the 6th century BCE, when this is going on with Persia coming into Kemet. Just so happened that, the Persians pass these Hebrews and give them a pass and let them back into the land, right? They get a pass then. They get a pass once the Greeks conquer the Persians in Egypt. They get 2 more passes. And then the Romans give them a pass. And just everybody's giving these Jews a pass and allowing them to go ahead and practice their religion, while meanwhile slaughtering, killing all these other African tribes and groups in real life by giving these Jews a pass. It don't make sense, especially if they're supposed to be black according to the Hebrews. It don't fit. That they just should be so nice to just keep giving these Jews a pass. And then later on, they fucking join them. Yes, they join them, but predominantly over there, the Greeks, Jews, Christians, Romans, Christians. Just they join them all of a sudden. Everything else is going on. We're going to join you people? Like, it doesn't make sense. What makes sense is these people created this stuff. That's what fits. People want to hold on to the Bible so hard to believe in this stuff. It does not fit. I had already in the Greek mythology series broke down all this stuff, and we went deep into it as far as getting into the validity of these people actually existing, which they did not. So I'm going to play a clip so you guys can just take a look at this part, and because you probably didn't see it, and see what I mean and how much proof is there that these people didn't exist. Take a look. If you do real research, everybody who has went on to study this whole thing and getting into the whole thing with the creation of the Bible. Now, if you're arguing biblical doctrine or biblical religion, especially with Hebrew Israelites, this is what you're getting into when you get into the scholarship of it. So for those of you who have looked, what did you find? You find, because you're trying to prove the authenticity of the Bible, which we cannot, because we're never going to have the originals or be able to prove that they even existed. So what we can prove is, one, if we can find proof that the Jews actually existed during a certain time prior, let's just say 4th century BCE, that they had a legacy and people talked about them, it gives more validity to the Bible itself. So what you had when you start to look, what did you find? You find a bunch of scholars who were trying to prove the existence of Jews. They were trying to look for the Jews. Now, this is prior to the whole conquering of Kemet. So understand, as I tell the Hebrews, when Kemet fell, part of the Egyptian empire was Israel. It stretched all the way over to Israel. So they came into Israel, they conquered Israel, which was full of African people, Egyptians, black people. I talked about Tunis, I talked about, Tyre or Tyrus. We know it was Africans there. All this was conquered, right? So when they conquered these lands and they started to implement Hellenization, which Hellenization is basically the spreading of this, what we call the Jewish doctrine. So they took these Africans and made them Jews, Hebrews. They bred them they didn't breed them. They basically raised them, put them in school to learn this and say to them, this is who you are. You are these people. And they made priests and taught them to go out and spread the word, just like we see with the Bible Christianity with the slaves. You had that one black guy that was up there preaching to the slaves. It's the same thing back then. It's where the whole concept came from. So when you look, you find these philosophers and researchers, Greeks, trying to prove this existence, right? So this is what you find. There's quite a few expensive books on this whole thing. And it says, Plato, in the creation of the Hebrew Bible, for the first time compares the ancient law collections of the ancient Near East, the Greeks, and the Pentateuch to determine the legal antecedents, which basically means the precursor, for the biblical laws. Following on from his 2006 work, Berosus and Genesis,
Manetho and Exodus, Merkin takes up his theory that the Pentateuch was written around 270 BCE using Greek sources found at the Library of Alexandria, and applies this to an examination of biblical law codes. A striking number of legal parallels are found between the Pentateuch and Athenian laws, and specifically with those found in Plato's law of circa 350 BCE. Constitutional features in biblical law, Athenian law, and Plato's laws also contain close correspondences. Several genres of biblical law, including the Decalogue, are shown to have striking parallels with Greek legal collections, and the synthesis of narrative and legal context is shown to be compatible with Greek literature. All this evidence points to direct influence from Greek writings, especially Plato's law, on the biblical legal tradition. Finally, it is argued that the creation of the Hebrew Bible took place according to the program found in Plato's laws for creating a legally authorized national ethical literature, reinforcing the importance of this specific Greek text to the authors of the Torah and Hebrew Bible in the early Hellenistic era. This study offers a fascinating analysis of the background of the Pentateuch and will be of interest not only to biblical scholars but also to students of Plato, ancient law, and Hellenistic literary traditions. Now here's basically the review of what one of these researchers wrote about Reed and Merkin's findings. And this is basically what they said to sum it up. It says, the thesis is therefore clear. The Pentateuch is a Greek work inspired by Greek sources. Understand, the Pentateuch is a Greek work inspired by Greek sources. To just piss some Hebrew off if they're watching it. The book is constructed in 6 chapters each, followed by bibliographs relating to that chapter. An index of sources and an index of authors closes the volume. It says thus, the thesis that the author pursues in this sequel of the first volume is that the Pentateuch in its legal parts is inspired by Platonic sources to which the 70, if you understand the letters of Orestes, the 70 Jews, had access in the Great Library of Alexandria. The argument is simple and comparative. The greater number of Pentateuchal laws, even if they had some Semitic precursors, seem copied from the Athenian law, or more precisely, the Platonic laws. Beyond this argument, the author proposes that the laws of Plato constitute a new hermeneutical, which basically means interpretation, a new hermeneutical key for the ideology not only of the Pentateuch, but the whole of the Bible. The Bible is the official national literature mandated according to the same instructions of the Platonic laws. If you understand that, that is big. So understand, Merkin, he was real careful in his book to not, say it flat out. He said what he said, and he let the information speak for itself. And if you got enough knowledge, you came to the right conclusions. But you had later scholars come out and say, what he meant. They reviewed the book. And the implications are, well, if this is all true, which it looks, then the Greeks created Christianity, which I've been saying, they created Judaism. It's all bullshit. Now, Merkin doesn't really come straight out and say it, try to make it as if, these people actually exist, because I doubt he want to really get in, on the bad side of Jews who running everything. But it's as if these people existed, and then you could somehow say, well, the Greeks didn't want to put out the truth. So they basically distorted. Like, they want to say that the Hebrews existed, but the Greeks didn't want to put out the truth, so they kind of distorted the information from the Hebrews about, what they actually said, which don't make sense, because if you didn't like it, you wouldn't have put out nothing. You wouldn't have said, you wouldn't even did the information, you would have put out your own stuff. So the story of getting these 72 Hebrew elders to put out this information doesn't make sense. Now, in understanding that you're going to do what they did with this whole creation, they could have done that, which it looks like they did. Go get 70 so-called Hebrews and get them to do this so-called translation just to have a record of it. Now, whoever came up with this whole Black Hebrew Israelite doctrine understands all this. They know, which is why, they don't really want to jump on this. They wouldn't dare read any of those books because they understand the implications. Now, the whole thing is they understand that when you go back and do the research, it all points to white Greeks. But when you leave that little door open saying possibly, this is what they're piggybacking on. Now, this is the reason why King James must be black, as I said. Because if King James is black, then you can say, well, God gave King James the true translation, the real translation. Don't read what these Greeks talk about. Read the King James version, the real translation. Or they'll say, the Masoretic text, because it's in Hebrew. Stuff like this. But what they don't say and what they don't address is, how come your God gave the knowledge to the white man before his chosen people? Think about that. Clearly the Greeks had this information first. So why is it that God gave it to them before his chosen people? Why would he give it to them? Who would change his image and change everything about the book and make all these so-called lies and so on and so forth. But you expect us to take the same stuff that was supposedly created, in deception and believe you on it with no proof. So now understand this, and this is what these Hebrews are not getting. If you don't do the research, you're not going to know this. And this is painstaking research. It is so much. You got to be crazy. You got to be obsessed, which, I am, and I really was back then when I was digging into all this. You got to be, because there's so much, you have to dig into. And if you learn it in truth, you'll figure it out. I'll lab on this later. You'll figure it out. So anybody that's doing research on the Jews, the Hebrews, 4th century BCE, if you're looking for anything on the Jews prior to 4th century BCE, there's only 4 sources that you can really go to. 4. And of those 4 sources, only one has real tangible, evidence that you can really believe. And he's the only one that everybody really goes to. So this is how you can break this stuff down. This is how you know who's who and who's doing the research. Because anything anybody said besides these 4 people is pseudo. It's bullshit. It's iffy. So these 4 people are the suspect one. I start with him first. Josephus, right? Josephus. Then you have Aristobulus. Then you have Diodorus Siculus, who this is largely about what Merkin wrote it. And then you have Hecataeus. Hecataeus and Diodorus is basically the primary people that he's sourcing for this book that Merkin wrote, because that's who you have to source. If you arguing with somebody about this and they're not citing, which the Hebrews will not, they won't, and you're going to find out why in a second. If they're not citing Hecataeus and Diodorus Siculus, forget it, because it's pseudo. It's pseudo. We're going to get into this in a second, but understand that. So you have Hecataeus, who is a large part of this book. He was 25 years old when Kemet fell. So he had 25 years of seeing Kemet being ruled by Egyptians. 25 years of that. And I believe he died in 550 BC. So he had 25 years, or that's when Kemet fell, was 550. So he knew, he had knowledge. Hecataeus understood what was going on. He's a historian. Look him up, he's a Greek historian. And he has 2 very important works that everybody knows about when you start researching this guy, Hecataeus. So you have Yanela, which Yanela basically means genealogy. Yanela Greek means genealogy, right? So Yanela genealogy, and Storia. So Storia is basically your history. So Storia, Greek history, that's where we get story. Storia, Genealogia, Genealogy. That's his book. That's what it translates into. The most important book is his one that's basically on his journey. The journey that he fucking took, supposedly, around the world, which is pronounced Periostos Gamma Sigma. Periostos Gamma Sigma. I got to say it a couple times to get it out. But it basically means journey around the world. So you have these important books by Hecataeus. And he's known for these books because he supposedly traveled and did this research on these civilizations of people, which is why he must be cited. Now, there are only about 300 or so fragments of these books in existence. And you have Theodorus, who is known for being, a person that had this library of books, of rare books. And supposedly he had probably a more fulfilled book or manuscript of Hecataeus' words. So it was fragments, but probably more complete than what we have today. Now, understand, Theodorus Siculus was born, about 400 years after Hecataeus. So we're talking about hundreds of years later that he's referencing Hecataeus and his works, Theodorus, right? So that's one of the important things to understand. When people are going to reference, they're going to Theodorus, who is referencing Hecataeus, who is important, because if you're going to say what somebody said, we need to know who this guy is and what he said exactly. And the thing with Theodorus and his writings, because Theodorus is paraphrasing Hecataeus. He's paraphrasing him because he's not going directly from manuscript, copying what he said specifically. He's paraphrasing from the fragments that he had. Now, as scholars, you have the fragments that all scholars agree upon that Theodorus cites. These are the fragments that everybody say, these ones is okay, they're authentic, we believe these are real. And you have the fragments that they don't have that is questionable. And for many reasons, which we'll get into some of them, because they don't know. Just like Theodorus, he speculates a little bit, but he's paraphrasing what's said. So now the whole thing is, of course, you have Hecataeus, who was born, around the time the Egyptians was ruling. And here's a guy who lived through the rulership of the Egyptians and lived through the conquest of the Persians. Now, if this dude was an historian and he traveled the world, as it says with his books, he's supposed to have traveled the world and everything like that, and did a genealogy and all this, at some point he had to speak to Jews. There's no way he could not have spoken to Jews or Hebrews. He had to have, and he had to have mentioned them. Now, according to Theodorus, he never mentions them. He never says that he spoke to any Jews. In fact, he says that what he heard about the Jews came from the Egyptians, which makes it even more suspect that how could you not have spoken to any Jews? And it says here, let's read. The undisputed fragments of Hecataeus in Theodorus Siculus' library, Book 1, display no awareness of the Pentateuch, while the account of the Jews in the Book 40 is so divergent from the Pentateuch as to guarantee that Hecataeus did not have access to Jewish writings, translated or otherwise. These difficulties are usually overcome by postulating that Hecataeus learned about the Pentateuch from Jewish priests living in Alexandria. But a second difficulty is that in Theodorus Siculus' library, Book 1, Hecataeus repeatedly named Egyptian priests as his sources. Nowhere did he claim to have had contact with Jews. If Hecataeus had contact with Jewish priests or had access to Jewish writings, he would have doubtless have said so to enhance the authority of his account. But Hecataeus made no such claims in undisputed fragments. Third, the detailed information Hecataeus allegedly presented about the Jews in Book 40 was not quoted or utilized by any author from 320 BCE to the time of Posidonius and Theodorus Siculus in the 1st century BCE. That Theophrastus read Hecataeus is certain. Yet, the description of heterodox Jews and Theophrastus on piety markedly differed from the detailed knowledge of Orthodox Judaism in the allegedly Hecataean passage in Book 40. Manetho's dependence on Hecataeus of Abdera is certain, yet his knowledge of the Jews was limited to their location in Jerusalem. That's all they know about them, where they came from. They didn't really know much. 2nd century BCE Alexandrian Jewish writers such as Aristobulus and Pseudo-Aristeas, which the letters of Aristeas is pseudo, and they had already came to the conclusion that Jews wrote this later on. The extensive research in the classics, including Hecataeus of Abdera, Aegyptica, but failed to discover a single passage in which an early Hellenistic author of Hecataeus' time or earlier quoted Jewish scripture. That so many writers on the Jews who were familiar with Hecataeus knew nothing of the context of Diodorus Siculus' library suggests that the latter passage did not derive from Hecataeus, meaning it's all bullshit. And you have to understand, this is the foundation evidence of proving the validity of the Bible. This is what you have to go to. The whole thing about the letters of Aristeas, all this stuff, it's all suspect, it's all pseudo. The only real tangible proof is what we have from Diodorus on Hecataeus' supposed writing of, what took place. That he doesn't say he met any Jews or anything like that. So I get Hebrew after Hebrew quoting, Josephus, as if Josephus was this major knowledgeable source who had, real good provable information, where he was always quoting from Aristobulus, which Aristobulus' information was pseudo. And it's even saying here in the sightings. It says down here, Josephus, in conducting a similar search on ancient writings for reference to the Jews, had to resort to the Jewish forgery Pseudo-Hecataeus. And this is on the page that says Aristobulus writing circa 150 BCE will likely have cited the source behind Diodorus Siculus' library, which he didn't, if it existed at the time. And Josephus is citing Aristobulus, and basically we know Aristobulus stuff is Pseudo-Hecataeus. Because if it's not, then he would have would have stated what Diodorus had, which he does not, or something better, since he lived, before him. But we don't get that. We don't get none of that information. So, bunch of stuff to look at. Now let's continue down here. It says, thus, despite the doubt attached to many quasi-historical details in Aristobulus' works, it still appears likely that he was correct in such basic details as the Septuagint originating under Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who I always talk about, and the involvement of 70 scholars associated with the Judean Perusia in executing this project. We may therefore date the Septuagint with reasonably high confidence to the period of 273 to 269 BCE under Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who was a white Greek. Since the Septuagint provides the first objective external evidence for the composition of the Pentateuch, the date of the Septuagint translation becomes a terminus ab quem for the books of Moses, which that's Latin. That basically means this is the only time that you could date this, around this time. That's basically what it means. It's the limit, or the only time you could date something. There exists no external evidence that the Pentateuch was written earlier than this time. Boom. Than this time of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. A proposed date of composition for the Pentateuch anytime prior to 269 BCE is permitted by current evidence and must be seriously considered. Significantly, although external evidence for the Pentateuch is lacking prior to the Septuagint translation of 273 to 269 BCE, the Septuagint set off an explosion of derivative Jewish writing in the 3rd century BCE, both in Syria and in Egypt. The following is a list of the earliest known Jewish writings with approximate dates of composition. None of it predates the Septuagint Greek or the 4th century BCE. And as I said, if the stuff is legit, we should find stuff. Historians, people around that time should have been talking about, there's no way in the world you can have what happens in the Old Testament, not written about as much, and then have stuff that is like so meaningless, like just talking about the gravestones of the Greeks. So elaborate, same thing with the Egyptians. And if they do all this stuff depicting what happened in these people's life that we can find, no way all of this stuff goes down and then we find nothing on the Hebrews. And again, as I pointed out, Herodotus, Greek historian, says nothing about the Jews. One of the things he cited says, neither Herodotus nor Hecataeus of Abdera claim to have consulted the Jews. Rather, the Egyptians were regularly cited as authorities throughout Diodorus Book 1, thought to have drawn heavily on Hecataeus of Abdera. Hecataeus of Abdera appears to have drawn exclusively on Egyptian oral sources supplemented by Herodotus. Never talked to any Jews because they didn't exist. It says here, Hieronymus of Cardia, the historian of the Wars of the Diadochi, 323, when Alexander died, to 278 BCE, fought under Antigonus Monothalamus in Palestine in 312 BCE and was assigned to supervise the collection of Alsfat or asphalt from the Dead Sea. He never mentioned the Jews. I'll leave it at that. And it says down here, the earliest Greek writers who mention the Jews thus provide no external evidence of new developments in the evolution of the Torah. At the time of the Elephantine Papyri, 494 to 400 BCE, we have authoritative Jewish priestly regulations, but no evidence that these have been committed to writing. The Elephantine Papyri also testify to toleration of practices contrary to the Pentateuch. As late as 315 BCE, Theophrastus described contemporary sacrificial practices among the Jews that the Hebrew Bible condemns as heterodox. The first mention of Moses as Jewish founder and lawgiver occurred in Hecataeus' A Aegyptica in 320 to 315 BCE. Manetho also mentioned Moses probably not long thereafter. Neither author attributed writings to Moses, although both appear to have viewed him as the lawgiver of the Jews. Other than the disputed fragment of Hecataeus in Diodorus Siculus Library 40.3, the Septuagint translation is the first definite evidence of Jewish writings. So it's clear as day what's going on here. The stuff that they was writing about contradicts the Hebrews, their supposed doctrine. And they're reading this stuff and it's like, no way this could be Hebrews if this stuff is real, because they're doing stuff contrary. And then to really dig deeper into this, you got to understand that these are Greeks. Plain and simple. These are people who are, even if they're black, they're people who was basically grew up in Greek understanding of things. This is later after the conquest of Egypt. Egypt is over 100 years gone now and conquered around this time. So we're talking about a couple hundred years later, so they are basically being indoctrinated into this Hellenization and the rituals. So contrary to what was written about, what must have happened is they came up with the story. They came up with who these Jews are supposed to be. And they got priests, they got people to go out and spread this story so it reached the ears of historians and people who was documenting the times. So all these historians you have, when you start to look and research this, they gathering around and trying to figure out, okay, we know these people are Jews, these people are supposed to be these people, but they're saying this is what happened to them, this is who they are, and so on and so forth. Let's validate this. And then they're going out. Now, we don't even know, one, Hecataeus, and what he actually said. We don't even know, because everything seems to be in, fragments. We can't get no real information because it's in fragments. But they have the fragments to say, oh, this person existed because we have fragments. But there's still no way to know if he existed or if he actually wrote this stuff. Diodorus he's paraphrasing. He's going off of what he thinks. Remember, this dude was born 400 years later. He don't know if Hecataeus is real, but he got his hands on this information that could have been easily planned for him to find and write about later, or anybody to find and write about. The point is, there's no real proof of these Jews. There's absolutely none. And just like we can go and find the tombs of all these other people, there should be mass tombs of these Jews. But the Hebrews believe, oh, God took them away. Oh, why don't God take y'all dead people away? Why did God leave them in the ground? But he takes our dead people away. Okay, where's the civilizations? Where's the artifacts? Where's the writings? Where's any of it? There's no proof. And then, again, why would your God give your doctrine to the white man before you if you are his chosen people? Because we can clearly see before King James, we had Ptolemy II Philadelphus. We had this whole creation of this Hebrew mess. Period. It's all pseudo. All of it. I don't even take the fragments as being truth. And we still only have a fragment of the Septuagint, so we don't even know what it originally said. Clear as day, as time went on, they added to the story until you get up to Saint Jerome all the way in the Vetus Latina and then the Latin Vulgate, what everything that was done with that whole debacle. And it's like, what is this stuff? And you people believe this? Are you serious? All of the mess surrounding this because they don't teach it.
Okay, so nothing else needs to be said. People are free to believe what they want to believe, but the proof is in the pudding, and there's no proof in this pudding for these people. They have nothing. You have faith, you have belief. The tablets are not proven to have been speaking towards actual Jews from the Bible. It's just that simple. It's too many issues. The fact that we have all this secrecy surrounding these tablets and who found them, when they found them, where they came from or what have you, is all secret, not public information. Then the tablets contradict what's in the Bible. Huge red flag. There's so much stuff surrounding it that it's just, you got to use common sense at some point. But they want desperately for these tablets to be real when there's no proof that they're real. You're not going to find any concrete proof that these people existed. Why are we looking for these people? Every other fucking civilization, even the damn Mayans who supposed to have disappeared, we got more proof that these people were actually here. They left stuff, ruins, like, carvings and shit. We don't find nothing. They left nothing. No bodies, no civilizations, no ruins, no nothing. They left nothing. But in the Bible, keep giving you all these stories about God destroying Israel. But we keep digging up Egyptian artifacts in fucking Israel. How many times he destroyed, but we digging up Egyptian artifacts because it was part of the Egyptian empire. You guys gotta wake up. You gotta wake up. Stuff is not real. The King James Version, written 1604, 1611. It is not giving you any black history. It's giving you what they knew was going down during that time. It is not, the King James Version wasn't written 2,000 years ago. It's the King James Version, his version of the accounts, which again, he's a Mason. King James was a Mason. Man who edited the Bible, Sir Francis Bacon, is considered one of the fathers of Freemasonry. You got to start taking all this stuff into account and snap the fuck out of it. This is not black history. It's distorted history to give you justification for what, what's done to us. And this is old shit. Because again, as I said, you go back and you look at, in real history, what the Hebrews are said to have been doing in the Bible. The Greeks are the only people on the planet that fits that MO in actual history. So the Greeks are the only people who fit going out and conquering these African lands. Same thing with the Romans later on. They're the only people who fit it, right? They're the only people who fit it. And then at the same time, you have them being the ones who gives us, this doctrine first. Think about that. So in the Bible, again, go and destroy these people, namely the Hivites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites, what have you. And then we find out that these people are from the line of Ham, which he's supposed to be the progenitor of African people, a black race, right? And then in real history, we go back and look and we see what's going on. They're wiping out African tribes in real life. That's what's going on. So you want to trace this book around being black and everything like that, and you believe it in this book and giving any type of aid to this book, is you going against black people, plain and simple. It's there to justify what happened to us, but it's a lot deeper than all that. So read the book, by all means. Read it, understand it, learn it, love it. It's one of the greatest books ever written, and you need to know it. But as far as you trying to find any real proven evidence or what have you, plenty of evidence. It's not proven evidence. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of evidence though, but nothing is proven, nothing is concrete that would say definitively, this is Jews, this is Jesus. It's none. It's nothing. Faith is all you got. That's it. So yeah, wanted to get into this video real quick. I have a lot already on this information. If it's not enough for you, go and do your own research. Be real with yourself. You want to believe the tablets existed and what have you, more power to you. Go do what you do. It's not going to prove the entire book and everything else. Just that simple. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to listen to my rant and calm down a little bit. I get hyped with this shit. But yeah, make sure you guys take advantage of stock market series. Remember, when you buy this new video, you get all the videos for this weekend. It's going to change. Same thing with Never Pay Again membership. The price is going to go back up. And right now, take advantage of it. Otherwise, at this low price, it's going to go back up, especially once the site finishes, because it's going to be a lot better. And, I want my real subscribers to be on there, Never Pay Again members or what have you. So take advantage of these sales. Keep doing your research. I'll let you guys know ahead of time in the next live stream. We got a lot coming to YouTube and Merkabah Academy. So yeah, stay tuned. And yeah, thanks for watching.